The rainforest floor is loud with life, yet the smallest movements are often the most consequential. Beneath the layered canopy, where sunlight fractures into shifting green shards and humidity hangs like a second skin, color becomes a language. Reds, yellows, blues, and impossible combinations of all three flash briefly against leaf litter and wet bark. In most ecosystems, such brightness would be suicidal. Here, it is a warning rendered in pigment. Among the ants, beetles, and orchids, poison dart frogs move openly, unhurried and unconcealed, their presence a biological statement rather than an attempt at disguise. Poison dart frogs are not dangerous because they attack. They are dangerous because they refuse to hide. Their skin is not a passive barrier, but an active interface between the frog and the world, saturated with alkaloid toxins that transform contact into consequence. These compounds are not manufactured from scratch inside the frog's body in the way venom is synthesized by snakes or spiders. Instead, the frogs acquire their chemical arsenal indirectly, sequestering toxins from the small arthropods they consume, ants, mites, beetles, that themselves feed on toxic plants or fungi. The frog becomes a living archive of its ecosystem's chemistry, concentrating and repurposing molecules forged far lower on the food web. This dependence on diet reveals something fundamental about how tightly evolution can bind an animal to its environment. In captivity, poison dart frogs raised on non-toxic diets lose their chemical defenses entirely. Their colors remain vivid, their behavior unchanged, but the danger is gone. In the wild, however, the chemistry is maintained with ruthless efficiency. The frog's skin glands store and stabilize these alkaloids, releasing them slowly across the surface of the body. There is no single delivery mechanism, no puncture or sting. The skin itself is the weapon. At the physiological level, the most notorious of these toxins target one of the most fundamental systems in animal biology, the movement of sodium ions across cell membranes. Sodium channels are microscopic gates embedded in nerve and muscle cells, opening and closing in precise sequences to generate electrical signals. Every thought, every muscle contraction, every heartbeat depends on these channels functioning correctly. Poison dart frog toxins, particularly those found in species like Philobates terribilis, bind to these channels and lock them into abnormal states. Some force them open permanently. Others prevent them from opening at all. Either outcome is catastrophic. When sodium channels malfunction, nerves cannot fire properly. Signals meant to travel in rapid, coordinated pulses dissolve into noise or silence. Muscles lose their ability to contract in sequence, slipping into paralysis or uncontrolled spasms. The heart, which relies on exquisitely timed electrical waves to maintain rhythm, is especially vulnerable. Disrupted sodium flow can trigger arrhythmias, slow the heart to a crawl, or push it into chaotic fibrillation. In this context, heart failure is not a slow mechanical breakdown, but an electrical mutiny, where the organ's internal timing collapses. In real biological encounters, the progression is swift. Toxin entering a wound or contacting mucous membranes bypasses many of the body's defenses. There is no need for injection under pressure or enzymatic breakdown. The molecules diffuse, bind, and begin interfering almost immediately. Early symptoms may include tingling, numbness, or weakness, but these are merely surface signals of a deeper collapse. As nerve transmission falters, muscles stop responding. Breathing becomes shallow or irregular. The heart's rhythm destabilizes. sometimes before the victim fully understands what is happening. The rainforest does not treat this danger as an anomaly. Predators learn quickly. Birds that attempt to seize a brightly colored frog often drop it within seconds, shaking their heads violently as toxins flood sensitive tissues in the mouth. Some survive and remember, others do not. Over time, the visual signal becomes reinforced. Bright equals lethal. The frog benefits not from killing every attacker, but from ensuring that most attackers never try again. This is chemical defense scaled to community-level learning, where the cost paid by a few reinforces safety for the many. Humans recognized the potency of this system long before modern chemistry could explain it. Indigenous cultures across parts of Central and South America observed the effects of these frogs on predators and adapted the chemistry for their own survival strategies. By carefully harvesting toxins and applying them to blowgun darts or arrow tips, hunters transformed small projectiles into lethal instruments. The amount required was astonishingly small. A tiny smear, invisible to the eye, was enough to bring down birds, monkeys, or larger mammals once it entered the bloodstream. The dart did not need to cause massive trauma. The toxin did the rest, flipping the victim's internal electrical systems against itself. This historical use underscores a critical point about scale. Poison dart frogs are small, often no larger than a thumb. Their jaws are weak, their limbs delicate, their bodies easily crushed. Yet the chemical leverage they exert is disproportionate to their size by orders of magnitude. Evolution has solved the problem of vulnerability not by increasing physical power, but by hijacking the most sensitive physiological systems of potential predators. The result is a defense that operates at the level of cellular machinery, invisible until it is already too late. The fear these animals inspire is not rooted in aggression, but in inevitability. There is no chase sequence, no dramatic confrontation. Contact is enough. A cut finger, a rubbed eye, a careless hand-to-mouth motion after handling contaminated surfaces. These are the kinds of mundane actions through which toxins can enter the body. In the rainforest, where sweat, insects, and minor injuries are constant companions, such pathways are always present. The frog does not need to pursue you. The chemistry waits. What makes sodium channel toxins especially unsettling is how little redundancy the body has against them. Many systems can compensate for partial failure. Muscles can rest, organs can adapt, and blood chemistry can be buffered. Electrical signaling, however, is binary in critical tissues. Either the signal propagates correctly or it does not. When enough channels are compromised, there is no workaround. The heart cannot simply try harder. It must follow its electrical instructions, and when those instructions are corrupted, the outcome is immediate and often fatal. From an ecological perspective, poison dart frogs are not simply walking hazards. They play roles as insect predators, nutrient recyclers, and indicators of forest health. Their dependence on specific prey ties them to intact ecosystems, making their presence a signal of biodiversity rather than danger alone. Remove the ants and mites that supply the toxins, and the frogs persist. But defanged, remove the forest itself, and the entire system collapses. The chemistry that terrifies is also evidence of deep ecological interdependence. There is a stark irony here. The same biochemical pathways that make these frogs deadly are also of immense interest to medical science. Sodium channel modulators are studied for their potential in pain management, cardiac research, and neurological disorders. Molecules that can selectively alter nerve signaling hold promise when controlled and disastrous potential when unleashed. In this way, Poison dart frogs sit at the boundary between medicine and mortality, their toxins both feared and coveted. The tiny animal, huge consequence reality is not hyperbole. It is a precise description of how evolution exploits vulnerability. A human heart weighs less than a pound, yet it governs life through rhythm. Poison dart frog toxins target that rhythm directly, bypassing strength, endurance, and conscious will. In encounters where enough toxin enters the body, the heart can indeed be the first organ to lose control, slipping into irregular patterns while other systems are still functioning. In the rainforest, size does not correlate with danger, silence does not imply safety. And beauty, in its most saturated forms, is often a declaration rather than an invitation. Poison dart frogs embody this truth with ruthless efficiency. They are small, luminous, and still. Yet beneath that stillness lies a chemistry tuned to disrupt the most fundamental processes that keep animals alive. To understand them is to understand how evolution can turn the smallest bodies into guardians of some of the most powerful switches in biology. Switches that, once flipped, cannot simply be turned back. Human spaces create their own ecosystems, and some of the most successful predators are the ones that slip into those systems unnoticed. Sheds, garages, crawl spaces, wood piles, irrigation boxes, storage rooms. These are not sterile extensions of a house, but artificial caves with stable temperatures, low disturbance, and a steady trickle of insect life. In those quiet margins, where hands reach without eyes and attention drifts toward routine, black widow spiders establish themselves with remarkable consistency. They do not need wilderness, they need neglect, shadow, and structure. Black widows thrive precisely because human environments accidentally mimic the conditions they evolved to exploit. Dark corners reduce exposure to predators. Stacked lumber and cluttered storage provide anchor points for irregular webs. Nighttime lighting draws insects, turning porches and garages into feeding grounds. Unlike wandering spiders that actively patrol, black widows build and wait, their silk forming chaotic tangles rather than neat spirals. These webs are not designed to be seen, they are designed to entangle. And because they are placed where human fingers and forearms sometimes intrude, beneath outdoor furniture, inside gloves, behind bins, the encounters that follow are rarely intentional. The spider itself is unassuming in scale, a glossy black body, long thin legs, and in many species the iconic red hourglass marking on the underside of the abdomen. It does not leap, chase, or threaten. Most bites occur when the spider is compressed, when skin presses it against a solid surface and escape becomes impossible. In that moment, the bite is a defensive reflex, not an attack. The fangs are small, the puncture often subtle. Many people barely register the initial sensation, describing it as a pinprick or a mild sting, easily dismissed amid the distractions of daily life. What follows, however, is anything but mild. Black widow venom is a neurotoxin optimized not for tissue destruction, but for hijacking the nervous system's signaling machinery. The primary component, alpha-latrotoxin, acts at nerve endings, forcing the massive release of neurotransmitters. Instead of precise, controlled chemical messages being released on demand, the system floods itself. Muscles receive continuous signals to contract. Glands are told to secrete. Pain pathways fire relentlessly. The body's internal communication network enters a state of pathological overdrive. This is why black widow envenomation often begins deceptively and escalates dramatically. Local pain may intensify around the bite site, but the defining feature is its spread. Within an hour or two, pain radiates outward, often concentrating in the abdomen, chest, back, and large muscle groups. The abdomen may become rigid, mimicking acute surgical emergencies. Muscles cramp hard and repeatedly, refusing to relax. Sweating becomes profuse as the autonomic nervous system is pulled into the storm. Nausea, vomiting, and restlessness follow, driven by both direct neurochemical effects and the body's response to extreme discomfort. The cardiovascular system does not sit idle during this process. The same neurotransmitter surge that locks muscles into spasm also stimulates the sympathetic nervous system, the branch responsible for fight or flight. Heart rate increases, blood pressure can spike significantly, blood vessels constrict or dilate unpredictably. For most healthy adults, this stress response is survivable, especially with medical care that includes pain control, muscle relaxants, and supportive monitoring. But survivable does not mean trivial. Patients often describe the experience not as pain alone, but as loss of internal control, a sensation that the body is acting independently of conscious intent. This is the autonomic storm that defines severe black widow envenomation. The autonomic nervous system normally operates quietly in the background, regulating heart rate, digestion, sweating, and vascular tone without conscious input. Black widow venom drags that system into the foreground, amplifying it until it becomes overwhelming. The chest tightens not because the heart is being physically damaged, but because it is being chemically overstimulated, pushed to work harder and faster under distorted signaling. Anxiety and panic are common, not only as psychological reactions, but as direct physiological effects of the venom-driven neurotransmitter surge. From an evolutionary perspective, this strategy makes brutal sense. Black widows prey primarily on insects and other arthropods, animals with nervous systems that are exquisitely vulnerable to neurotransmitter disruption. A venom that forces continuous nerve firing ensures rapid immobilization, preventing prey from escaping or damaging the spider. The same venom, scaled up against a mammal, does not kill efficiently, but it does incapacitate. Pain, cramping, and systemic distress discourage predators from ever repeating the mistake. The spider does not need to be lethal. It needs to be unforgettable. This is why black widows persist so effectively around humans despite being widely feared. Their survival does not depend on aggression or concealment alone, but on a defensive chemistry that imposes a high cost on careless contact. Many animals learn quickly to avoid them. Humans, lacking evolutionary exposure, often learn the hard way. The spider's success is amplified by its low energy demands and sedentary lifestyle. It can sit for weeks in the same corner, web intact, feeding opportunistically and conserving resources. Human activity creates the structure. Insects supply the energy. Venom provides insurance. Medically, black widow bites occupy an uncomfortable middle ground. They are rarely fatal in healthy adults, yet they are among the most painful envenomations encountered in temperate regions. Children, the elderly, and individuals with underlying cardiovascular disease face higher risks, not because the venom selectively targets them, but because their physiological reserves are lower. A sudden spike in blood pressure, sustained muscle contraction, or prolonged stress response can tip vulnerable systems into dangerous territory. This is why treatment is not optional, even when the bite seems minor at first. The realism of black widow envenomation matters because popular narratives often distort it in opposite directions. Some dismiss it as overhyped, focusing on low mortality rates, Others portray it as instantly deadly, which it rarely is. The truth is more unsettling. The experience is prolonged, intense, and deeply uncomfortable. Pain can persist for days. Fatigue and residual muscle soreness may linger even after acute symptoms resolve. Survivors frequently report that the psychological impact, the sense of internal chaos and loss of bodily autonomy, outlasts the physical pain. Ecologically, black widows are not villains. They reduce populations of insects that thrive around human waste and lighting. They occupy a narrow niche, rarely leaving their webs unless disturbed. Their presence is a symptom of environmental structure, not malice. Remove clutter, seal entry points, and reduce insect attractants, and their numbers drop naturally. Yet their persistence serves as a reminder that chemical defenses are not limited to exotic jungles or remote ecosystems. They operate quietly in basements and backyards, embedded in the same spaces we consider safe. The spider's small size is central to the unease it provokes. There is a cognitive mismatch between appearance and effect. A large predator announces danger through bulk and motion. A black widow offers no such warning. Its threat is latent, encoded in molecules rather than muscle. When that threat is activated, the result is not a dramatic wound, but a systemic takeover. Pain, cramping, sweating, racing heart, unfolding from the inside out. This is why the black widow is best understood not as a predator in the traditional sense, but as a chemical switch. One moment, the body is operating within normal parameters. The next, its internal signaling is hijacked, pushed into extremes it did not choose. The chest feels tight, not because something external is crushing it, but because the heart and surrounding muscles are being driven by corrupted commands. Panic is not imagined, it is manufactured. In the end, black widows persist alongside humans because they exploit the same principle that underlies so many successful survival strategies: leverage. They invest minimal energy in movement or growth and maximal energy in chemistry. The payoff is disproportionate to their size. This is not a monster that hunts you. It is a reminder that some of the most powerful biological threats are not defined by strength or speed, but by precision, by the ability to flip a switch in the nervous system and let the body unravel itself under its own signals. The river looks inert at first glance, a wide sheet of brown water sliding past fallen branches and half-submerged roots, its surface broken only by insects and drifting leaves. Light barely penetrates the silt-heavy flow, turning depth into a guessing game and distance into abstraction. This is the kind of water where shapes dissolve quickly and sound travels farther than sight, where the ecosystem is built less on vision than on vibration, pressure, and electrical noise. In these conditions, one of the most specialized predators on the continent thrives, not by speed, not by teeth, but by turning physics itself into a weapon. Electric eels are not curiosities or evolutionary accidents. They are highly refined biological machines designed for a world where murkiness erases most conventional hunting strategies. Along nearly their entire length, their bodies are packed with stacked electric organs, thousands of disc-shaped cells arranged like batteries wired in series. Each cell produces only a tiny voltage on its own, but when synchronized, the combined discharge becomes immense. These organs are not passive features, they are under neural control, allowing the eel to vary the strength, timing, and pattern of its electrical output with remarkable precision. Low-voltage pulses are used constantly, forming an invisible sensory net that maps the surrounding water. High-voltage discharges are reserved for moments that matter: defense, capture, and dominance in an environment where hesitation can mean death. In clear water, a predator can stalk visually, adjusting its approach based on shape and movement. In the Amazon's flooded forests and slow backwaters, that strategy collapses. Here, electric eels fill the gap by actively probing their environment with electricity, detecting distortions in the electric field caused by muscle movement or conductive tissues. A fish twitching behind a root, a crab buried in mud, even the faint bioelectric signature of a resting animal can betray its presence. The eel does not chase blindly. It interrogates the darkness, building a three-dimensional understanding of its surroundings through feedback loops that are as much neurological as ecological. When the eel escalates from sensing to striking, the effect is immediate and violent. A high-voltage discharge floods the water around it, radiating outward in all directions. For prey, the result is catastrophic. Involuntary muscle contractions, loss of coordination, and instant immobilization. The eel does not need to bite immediately. It can fire repeated pulses, maintaining control over a struggling target by keeping its muscles locked in a state of electrical paralysis. This ability to dominate without physical contact is rare in nature and profoundly effective in an environment where grappling can be dangerous. For a human, the same mechanism becomes something far more insidious. Unlike venom, which has to enter the bloodstream and follow biochemical pathways, electricity acts instantly on nerves and muscles. A strong discharge can force every major muscle group to contract at once, overwhelming voluntary control. Arms clamp inward, fingers curl uselessly, legs stiffen or buckle without warning. Breathing, which depends on finely coordinated muscle movement, can break down in seconds. The diaphragm may spasm. The chest may lock in mid-expansion or collapse. In water, that momentary loss of coordination is often all it takes. The danger does not stop at muscle control. The human heart relies on precise electrical signaling to maintain its rhythm, and while it is well insulated and resilient, it is not immune to disruption. Sudden external electrical shocks, especially when repeated, can interfere with normal cardiac signaling. The risk increases under conditions common in river encounters: cold water that heightens stress responses, panic that spikes adrenaline, and physical exertion that already strains the cardiovascular system. The eel does not need to stop the heart outright. Even brief irregularities, misfires, skipped beats, chaotic signaling can create a cascade of problems when combined with oxygen deprivation and loss of balance. Imagine a fisherman wading slowly along the river's edge, feet sinking into soft mud with each step. The water reaches mid-thigh, opaque enough that nothing below the surface is visible. This is routine work, repeated countless times without incident, and familiarity breeds a dangerous sense of predictability. Somewhere nearby, an electric eel rests beneath a submerged log, its low-voltage pulses quietly mapping the disturbance of approaching footsteps. The eel does not distinguish intent. It detects proximity, vibration, and intrusion into its electric space. When the distance closes too quickly, the response is automatic. The first shock is not always recognized for what it is. It can feel like a violent jolt from below, a sudden internal seizure that has no obvious source. The fisherman's legs contract hard, knees locking or jerking unpredictably. Balance disappears instantly, replaced by a reflexive gasp as the body tries to orient itself. Water rushes upward, filling the mouth and nose as the head dips below the surface. Panic follows fast, amplifying every physiological response and accelerating oxygen loss. A second discharge can arrive before the first has fully registered. Electric eels are capable of firing in rapid succession, maintaining control over a threat or target by overwhelming its nervous system. With repeated hits, voluntary movement becomes nearly impossible. The muscles are no longer responding to intention, but to external commands imposed by the eel's electric field. The fisherman may try to stand, to push upward, but the legs refuse to cooperate. Each attempt triggers another involuntary contraction, another loss of balance, another breath swallowed instead of drawn. This is where the river itself becomes the primary danger. The eel does not need to attack directly or persist indefinitely. Water is unforgiving to bodies that cannot coordinate movement or breathing. Even strong swimmers are vulnerable when their muscles misfire and their heart rhythm falters. Cold, turbid water disorients. Mud grips at feet. Submerged roots snag clothing. The environment compounds the physiological assault, turning a momentary encounter into a sustained crisis. From an ecological perspective, none of this is accidental. Electric eels evolved these capabilities not to hunt humans, but to dominate a niche where other predators struggle. Their electrical organs serve multiple roles: sensory, offensive, and defensive, making them unusually adaptable in flooded forests where water levels rise and fall dramatically throughout the year. During high water, when fish disperse into vast new territories, the eel's ability to detect and immobilize prey without visual contact becomes even more valuable. During low water, confined pools amplify the effectiveness of electric discharges, creating zones of control that few animals challenge. There is a grim irony in how this adaptation intersects with human physiology. Our own nervous systems, finely tuned for terrestrial life and precise motor control, become liabilities in conductive environments. The same electrical language that keeps our hearts beating and our muscles coordinated can be hijacked, briefly but decisively, by an external source evolved to exploit that vulnerability in other animals. In these moments, there is no poison to neutralize, no wound to bandage. The threat is systemic, invisible, and instantaneous. Understanding this interaction is not about fear-mongering, but about recognizing how deeply environment and physiology are intertwined. Rivers are not passive backdrops. They are active participants in every encounter that unfolds within them. In muddy Amazonian waters, electricity travels efficiently, turning the eel's body into a weaponized extension of the habitat itself. The fish does not chase or overpower in the traditional sense. It alters the rules of engagement, forcing other organisms to operate on its terms or fail entirely. The real terror, then, is not the shock itself, but what it sets in motion: a disrupted heartbeat, a locked diaphragm, a body that no longer obeys conscious command. These are failures that cascade rapidly in water. Survival depends less on strength than on luck and proximity to safety. The eel slips away as quietly as it arrived, its role complete, while the river continues to move, indifferent to the outcome. In this ecosystem, venom is optional. Teeth are secondary. Control over electricity is enough. When your muscles betray you and your heart stutters under an alien rhythm, the danger is no longer external. It is internal, amplified by panic and environment, and it unfolds on a timescale too fast for correction. In the Amazon, sometimes the deadliest weapon is not a predator's bite, but the moment your own body stops responding the way you expect, while the water closes in around you. The yard looks ordinary at night, a rectangle of trimmed grass, a concrete path still warm from the day, a porch light burning like a small artificial moon. Insects gather instinctively around that light, spiraling and colliding in a cloud of wings and soft impacts. This is not wilderness in the traditional sense, it is suburbia, the controlled edge where human habit meets ecological opportunity. and sitting motionless beneath the glow, squat and unremarkable, is one of the most chemically dangerous vertebrates most people will ever encounter without realizing it. The marine toad, often called the cane toad, does not advertise itself as a threat. Its posture is low, its movements slow and inefficient looking, its skin dry and warty rather than sleek or aggressive. It does not stalk prey or lunge with intent. Instead, it waits. Night after night, it positions itself where insects predictably fall, turning human lighting into a feeding subsidy. Moths, beetles, cockroaches, and flying ants rain down within tongue's reach, and the toad feeds with mechanical efficiency. This behavior brings it directly into yards, patios, garages, and dog runs, embedding it into human space so completely that it becomes background noise, just another animal sharing the night. This proximity is not accidental. Marine toads are ecological opportunists with broad tolerances for temperature, moisture, and habitat structure. They thrive in disturbed landscapes, from agricultural fields to city edges, because those environments offer exactly what they need: shelter, water, and concentrated food sources. Their physiology allows them to conserve moisture effectively, regulate body temperature through behavior rather than internal heat production, and remain active through long, warm nights when many predators are resting. The same traits that make them successful invaders also make them dangerously familiar. The danger lies not in what the toad does, but in what it is. Behind each eye sits a large parotoid gland, swollen and clearly visible once you know to look for it. These glands are not passive storage sacs. They are pressurized chemical reservoirs filled with a milky secretion loaded with cardiotoxic compounds. When the toad is threatened, picked up, squeezed, mouthed, or bitten, muscles around the glands contract, forcing the toxin outward through tiny pores. There is no bite, no sting, no injection mechanism. The poison is simply released onto whatever made contact. For a dog, the encounter often unfolds in seconds: a curious nose, a quick snap, a playful bite, and the toad's defense is triggered instantly. The toxin coats the dog's gums, tongue, and oral tissues, absorbing rapidly through mucous membranes. There is no barrier to slow it down, no skin to penetrate, no wound required. Within moments, the dog begins to drool excessively, thick ropes of saliva pouring from its mouth as the nervous system reacts to chemical assault. Pouring at the face follows, then disorientation, tremors, and loss of coordination. What looks like panic is often the early stage of systemic poisoning. The most dangerous effects, however, are invisible. Marine toad toxins include compounds structurally similar to digitalis, a cardiac glycoside historically used and feared in human medicine for its narrow margin between therapeutic dose and lethal overdose. These chemicals interfere directly with sodium-potassium pumps in heart muscle cells, disrupting the electrical gradients that allow the heart to beat in a coordinated rhythm. As those gradients collapse, the heart can slow, race, or fall into chaotic arrhythmias. Blood pressure swings unpredictably. Oxygen delivery falters. What begins as drooling and agitation can escalate into seizures, collapse, and cardiac failure with frightening speed. Humans are not immune. While severe poisonings are less common, they do occur, particularly when people handle toads without understanding the risk or attempt to remove them manually. Toxin contact with eyes, mouth, or broken skin can trigger intense symptoms, including nausea, vomiting, dizziness, and dangerous cardiac effects. Children are especially vulnerable. not because the toad seeks them out, but because their smaller body size magnifies the dose relative to mass. In these cases, the illusion of harmlessness becomes a liability. A slow, ugly amphibian does not trigger the same caution as a snake or spider, yet its chemical defenses can be far more immediately life-threatening. Speed is the defining feature of this interaction. Unlike venoms that require time to circulate or pathogens that incubate quietly, marine toad toxins act almost as soon as they enter the body. The window between exposure and crisis can be measured in minutes, not hours. This compresses decision-making brutally. A normal evening, letting the dog out, taking out the trash, walking barefoot across the lawn, can pivot suddenly into a race against physiology. Washing the mouth, flushing exposed tissue, and reaching emergency care become urgent, time-critical actions rather than precautionary steps. From an evolutionary standpoint, this chemical arsenal is an answer to a specific problem. Amphibians are soft-bodied, slow-moving, and poorly equipped for physical combat. Teeth and claws are not options. Chemical defense, by contrast, scales effectively against a wide range of predators. A toxin that induces immediate vomiting, seizures, or cardiac distress teaches a powerful lesson to any animal that survives the encounter. Over evolutionary time, this selectivity favors predators that avoid the toad entirely, reinforcing the effectiveness of its strategy without requiring frequent lethal outcomes. The tragedy is that domestic animals and humans do not share that evolutionary history. Dogs, in particular, are neurologically wired for investigation through the mouth. Their curiosity is tactile and oral, not visual and cautious. The toad's defense, honed against reptiles and mammals that learn quickly from pain, becomes disproportionately dangerous when applied to a species that does not interpret warning signs in the same way. Bright coloration, hissing, or aggressive displays might deter a wild predator. A silent, motionless toad under a porch light does not. There is also a broader ecological irony at play. Marine toads often reduce insect populations around homes, performing a service that might otherwise be welcomed. They recycle nutrients, consume agricultural pests, and exploit niches created by human activity. Yet the same adaptability that allows them to integrate so seamlessly into altered environments also increases the frequency of dangerous encounters. They are not invaders in the dramatic sense of tearing through landscapes visibly. They settle in quietly, becoming part of the nightly routine until something goes wrong. What makes this animal uniquely unsettling is how little effort it requires to trigger a medical emergency. It does not pursue, ambush, or defend territory aggressively. It does not inject venom through specialized anatomy. It simply exists, carrying a chemical system that reacts automatically to pressure. The threat is passive, latent, and activated by touch alone. In a world where danger is often associated with intent, this kind of risk is easy to underestimate. Understanding the marine toad requires reframing how we think about safety in shared environments. Backyards are ecosystems, not sterile buffers between humans and nature. Lights, water bowls, pet food and shelter all shape animal behavior, drawing certain species closer while excluding others. The toad's presence under a porch light is not an anomaly. It is a predictable outcome of ecological incentives. Recognizing that does not make the animal a villain, but it does strip away the illusion that proximity equals harmlessness. The punchline is not dramatic, but it is precise. The marine toad does not chase, bite, or hunt you. It does not need to. Its defense is already loaded, its chemistry primed. One grab, one bite, One careless moment is enough to set off a chain reaction that the heart may not tolerate. In that sense, it is one of the most efficient dangers in the human-modified landscape. A reminder that some of the most serious biological threats are not marked by violence or motion, but by quiet chemical certainty waiting under the porch light. Night settles differently in rural homes. The darkness is not a clean absence of light, but a layered condition, thick with insect noise, cooling walls, and the slow release of heat from roofs and floors. Windows are often open. Cracks in wood expand and contract with temperature. The boundary between indoors and outdoors is porous, negotiated rather than enforced. This is the environment in which assassin bugs, also known as kissing bugs or triatomines, operate with unnerving efficiency, moving through human space not as invaders, but as opportunists following ancient routines. They emerge after midnight, when breathing deepens and movement slows. Their bodies are flat, well suited for slipping into narrow seams along walls, behind picture frames, beneath mattresses. Unlike mosquitoes, they do not announce themselves with sound. Unlike spiders, they do not wait in fixed webs. Assassin bugs walk deliberately, guided by heat and carbon dioxide, drawn toward exposed skin and the steady rhythm of a sleeping body. Faces are favored targets not for symbolism, but for biology. Thin skin, rich blood supply, and proximity to mucous membranes. The bite itself is rarely memorable. Assassin bugs insert their mouthparts with surgical precision, delivering a small dose of saliva that numbs the area and prevents blood clotting. Most people do not wake. There is no sharp pain, no violent reaction. The bug feeds quietly for minutes, then withdraws. If this were the end of the interaction, the insect would be little more than an unpleasant nocturnal parasite, another blood feeder exploiting human vulnerability. But the real danger does not come from the bite, it comes from what happens next. After feeding, assassin bugs defecate. This behavior is not incidental. It is a critical part of their biology. In many species, the feces are deposited close to the bite site, sometimes directly on the skin. Within that waste can live microscopic passengers, parasites that have co-evolved with the bug to exploit its feeding habits. These parasites do not enter through the bite itself. Instead, they wait. A sleeping person stirs. An itch registers faintly. Fingers move unconsciously to the face, rubbing the bite, smearing the area. The parasites are transferred from feces into the tiny puncture wound, or into the eyes, or onto mucous membranes. No sensation marks this moment. No alarm is triggered. The body accepts the intrusion without resistance because it does not recognize it as a threat. The assassin bug leaves. The night resumes its quiet. The encounter is over, and yet it has only just begun. The parasite responsible for Chagas disease does not behave like a toxin or venom. It does not overwhelm the body in hours or days. It is patient. Once inside, it enters cells and begins a slow process of replication and migration. The immune system responds, often producing mild, non-specific symptoms: fever, fatigue, swelling near the bite or eye, that are easily dismissed or attributed to other infections. In many cases, there are no noticeable symptoms at all. The acute phase passes quietly. Life continues. This is the long-game horror that defines Chagas disease. The parasite does not seek immediate dominance. It seeks persistence. Over months and years, it establishes itself in tissues with high metabolic activity, particularly the heart. Cardiac muscle cells become reservoirs. Inflammatory responses flare intermittently, damaging tissue in small increments. Scar tissue replaces healthy muscle fibers. Electrical conduction pathways are distorted. The architecture of the heart begins to change, slowly and invisibly. From the outside, nothing seems wrong. A person may feel healthy, capable, unaffected. Routine work continues. The parasite is not killing cells indiscriminately. It is reshaping the heart structure over time. The chambers may enlarge as the muscle weakens, stretching to maintain output. Valves begin to leak. Electrical signals that once traveled cleanly now encounter dead ends and detours, creating the conditions for dangerous arrhythmias. The heart compensates until it can no longer do so. Years later, sometimes decades, the consequences surface. Shortness of breath during exertion, unexplained fatigue, dizziness or fainting episodes as heart rhythm falters, swelling in the legs as circulation fails. In severe cases, sudden cardiac death caused by lethal arrhythmias in a heart that has been silently compromised for half a lifetime. At this stage, the connection to a single night bite long ago is rarely obvious. The assassin bug is forgotten. The disease appears to have no origin. What makes this dynamic especially disturbing is how well it exploits human perception of risk. We are primed to fear immediate threats, pain, bleeding, violent encounters. We respond poorly to delayed consequences, especially those that unfold beyond the horizon of memory. Assassin bugs do not chase, swarm, or attack openly. They do not provoke fear at the moment of contact. Their danger lies in the delay, in the way survival itself becomes misleading. You wake up, you live. And because you live, the parasite is given time to work. Ecologically, assassin bugs are not villains. They are predators and scavengers in their own right, feeding on other insects as well as blood. Their role in ecosystems predates humans by millions of years. Chagas disease is not something they invented for us. It is an accidental alignment of parasite, vector, and host created by shared space. Poor housing construction, proximity to domestic animals, and deforestation all increase contact rates, pulling humans deeper into a transmission cycle that once operated largely among wild mammals. The disease itself reflects an uncomfortable truth about biological warfare. Not all successful strategies are fast. In evolutionary terms, a parasite that kills too quickly limits its own spread. One that weakens gradually, allowing its host to function for years, achieves far greater reach. Chagas disease exemplifies this logic with brutal elegance. By the time the heart begins to fail, the parasite may be long gone from the bloodstream, leaving behind only structural damage and electrical instability. This delayed collapse challenges our intuition about cause and effect. We expect illness to follow exposure closely, to announce itself with clear symptoms. Chagas disease breaks that rule. It asks us to accept that an event too small to remember, a bug crawling across your face in the dark, can set in motion a process that ends in heart failure decades later. There is no dramatic origin story, just a quiet night and a quiet beginning. From a physiological standpoint, the heart is uniquely vulnerable to this kind of slow sabotage. It is a muscle that never rests, dependent on coordinated electrical signals to function effectively. Small disruptions, repeated over long periods, compound. Fibrosis alters conduction. Dilatation reduces efficiency. Eventually, the system reaches a tipping point where compensation fails catastrophically. The tragedy is not only the damage itself, but the loss of opportunity for early intervention, when treatment could halt or slow progression. Modern medicine has made progress in diagnosing and managing Chagas disease, but challenges remain. Many infected individuals live for years without symptoms and are never tested. By the time cardiac involvement is detected, damage may be irreversible. Pacemakers, defibrillators, and transplants become the last lines of defense against a disease that entered the body silently and stayed hidden. This is what makes assassin bugs such a powerful narrative pivot in understanding biological danger. They invert the expectation of immediacy. The threat is not the bite. The threat is the time that follows. Survival becomes part of the mechanism of harm. The body does not collapse in panic or pain. It continues, adapts, compensates, until adaptation itself becomes exhaustion. In ecosystems shaped by humans, the assassin bug thrives not through aggression, but through patience. It exploits sleep, architecture, and forgetfulness. Its partnership with the parasite transforms an ordinary night into a long-term cardiovascular risk, one that cannot be traced by sensation alone. There is no scar to warn you, no memory to connect cause and effect. This chapter makes the story special precisely because it denies the comfort of immediacy. There is no instant death, no dramatic rescue, no clear moment of danger. There is only a delayed reckoning, written slowly into heart muscle by a microscopic passenger delivered in the dark. In that sense, the assassin bug represents one of the most unsettling truths in biology. Sometimes the most dangerous encounters are the ones you walk away from, alive, unaware, and already changed. Morning routines feel safe because they are familiar. A hand reaches into a boot left by the door. Clothes are lifted from a chair. A bunch of bananas is moved from crate to counter. Firewood is stacked, shifted, carried closer to the house. None of these actions feel like wildlife encounters. They are domestic gestures, performed half awake or distracted, built on the assumption that danger lives somewhere else. For the Brazilian wandering spider, that assumption is the opening it needs. Unlike web-bound spiders that anchor themselves to fixed locations, Brazilian wandering spider lives by movement. It hunts on the ground, actively roaming leaf litter, plantations, storage sheds, and human structures in search of insects, small vertebrates, and shelter. At night, when temperatures drop and prey becomes active, it travels widely. By day, it looks for dark, tight spaces that retain moisture and warmth. Boots, folded clothes, banana clusters, toolboxes, wood piles, all of these replicate the crevices and debris piles of its natural environment with uncanny accuracy. This is why so many encounters happen at home rather than deep in the forest. The spider does not invade with intent. It hides. Its body is built for compression, legs folding inward to fit into spaces barely larger than itself. In agricultural regions, bananas provide a near-perfect refuge. Dense clusters, protective layers, and transport pathways that move spiders from plantations into homes and markets. The spider does not need to seek humans. It only needs to be in the wrong place when a hand closes or a foot slides in. When a bite occurs, it is usually defensive. The wandering spider is fast, alert, and highly reactive. When trapped or pressed against skin, it does not hesitate. The fangs are long for a spider, capable of penetrating human skin efficiently. The venom delivery is deliberate, not accidental. This is not a dry warning nip. The spider evolved to subdue struggling prey quickly, and its venom reflects that purpose. The first sensation is often immediate and intense. Pain erupts at the bite site, sharp and burning, radiating outward along the limb. This is not localized irritation. It is the opening signal of a systemic event. Within minutes, the nervous system begins to respond globally. Sweating becomes profuse, soaking clothing and skin even in cool air. Nausea follows, sometimes escalating to vomiting. Tremors ripple through muscles as nerve signaling destabilizes. The body feels overheated, as if internal thermostats have been broken and reset at random. This sensation of overheating is not imagined. Brazilian wandering spider venom interferes with ion channels that regulate nerve and muscle activity, particularly those involved in sodium flow. These channels are fundamental to how nerves fire and muscles contract. When disrupted, signals become exaggerated and prolonged. Muscles may contract too strongly or too often. Pain pathways remain open instead of shutting down. Autonomic responses, sweating, heart rate, blood pressure, are amplified beyond normal control. The result is a body that feels as if it is running at maximum output without a throttle. Heart rate increases. Blood pressure can swing unpredictably, sometimes spiking, sometimes dropping, as vessels respond erratically to mixed signals. Breathing may become rapid or labored, driven by both pain and direct neurotoxic effects on respiratory muscles. The heart is not the primary target of the venom, but it is forced to operate inside this biochemical chaos, compensating continuously for signals that no longer make sense. In most healthy adults with access to rapid medical care, this storm can be weathered. Anti-venom, pain control and supportive treatment stabilize the system, allowing the body to clear the venom and regain equilibrium. Survival rates are high when treatment is timely, but focusing on survival statistics misses the physiological reality of the event. The experience is overwhelming. Patients often describe it as losing ownership of their body, as if internal systems have been hijacked and pushed to extremes without consent. This matters because severe envenomation is not simply about pain tolerance. Extreme physiologic stress taxes every organ system simultaneously. Sustained high heart rate and blood pressure strain the cardiovascular system. Repeated muscle contractions increase metabolic demand and heat production. Respiratory distress reduces oxygen delivery at the very moment tissues need more. In individuals with limited physiological reserve, this combination becomes dangerous quickly. Children are at higher risk because venom dose scales poorly with body size. What overwhelms an adult's nervous system can push a child's into outright failure. The elderly face similar risks due to reduced cardiovascular flexibility and pre-existing conditions that limit compensation. Add distance from medical care, remote villages, plantations far from hospitals, and the danger escalates sharply. Delayed treatment means prolonged stress, increasing the likelihood of complications such as respiratory failure or cardiac instability. The wandering spider's reputation is often inflated by myth, but that does not make it harmless. Its venom is among the most potent of any spider species, not because it is optimized to kill humans, but because it is optimized to act fast on complex nervous systems. In prey animals, this speed ensures immobilization before resistance can cause injury. In humans, it produces a full-body crisis that demands immediate attention. Ecologically, this venom is not excess. The wandering spider occupies a competitive niche. It hunts animals that can fight back, large insects, small reptiles, even rodents. Speed matters. Hesitation costs energy and increases risk. A venom that floods the nervous system, causing rapid pain and dysfunction, tilts the encounter decisively in the spider's favor. The same traits that make it a successful nocturnal hunter also make it dangerous when human routines intersect with its hiding places. There is a dark irony in how human behavior amplifies the risk. We build structures that mimic forest debris. We store produce in bulk. We leave boots on floors and clothes in piles. We reach without looking because habit tells us these spaces are inert. The wandering spider does not exploit malice, it exploits predictability. Its danger lies not in aggression, but in coincidence. Physiologically, the heart's role in this event is often misunderstood. The venom does not attack the heart directly in the way some toxins do. Instead, it forces the heart into overdrive by destabilizing the systems that regulate it. Imagine an engine with the accelerator stuck, cooling fans malfunctioning, and sensors feeding false data to the control unit. The engine may not explode immediately, but the strain accumulates rapidly. That is the condition the heart is placed under during severe envenomation. Continuous demand, conflicting signals, no rest. Most people recover, but recovery does not erase the lesson. The memory of total systemic overload lingers. It reframes how small animals are perceived, not as harmless background noise, but as living systems equipped with tools evolved for very different rules of engagement. The wandering spider is not a monster. It does not hunt humans. But it carries a chemical capability that, when triggered, can turn an ordinary day into a medical emergency in minutes. In the broader context of this series, the Brazilian wandering spider represents a specific kind of threat. Not instant death, not delayed disease, but acute overload. The body is pushed beyond its regulatory limits all at once. Survival depends on how quickly order can be restored, by medicine, by physiology, by distance from danger. The bite is a single moment. The consequences unfold as a cascade. The hook, ultimately, is not fear of spiders. It is recognition of how fragile control really is. One bite, delivered during a routine action, can transform the body into a runaway engine. The heart is forced to fight a war it did not sign up for, driven by signals it did not generate, inside an environment that offers no pause button. In that sense, the Brazilian wandering spider is not just a creature of the forest floor. It is a reminder that danger does not always announce itself, and that sometimes the most severe biological crises begin with the most ordinary motions of daily life.